Now in this section I'll set about doing the sky. Notice that I don't feel it's necessary to do the sky first, and in fact it seems rather foolish to start with one of the biggest areas on the painting and possibly one of the more important areas when you haven't sort of got your hand in and just seen how the paper is going to take the paint given the conditions, the humidity and the temperature. This is particularly the case when you're painting outside. Now it's quite easy to paint around the buildings, but I do paint right over the trees, simply because I don't want sort of white paper as a sort of a halo around the any foliage. And this seems a good time to set about doing the sky. Now I know beginners find the sky quite difficult, but don't think of it in any other way. Incidentally, I don't bother to change my water, and as a good guide to simplifying the sky when you first start to paint, I'm just restrict the number of colours that you're going to use. I'm going to use cobalt blue, some light red and a little bit of raw sienna, and that's all. So if I take some, and water of course, so if I take some light red and some raw sienna, tiny bit of cobalt, that'll give me a light, and lots of water, that'll give me a very light grey, bluey grey, or sorry, a warm grey for the light areas of sky. Put the brush on the paper and swirl it around, starting at the top again, so it's no different from painting a house. You're just warming up the paper. Now let's go for the cobalt. Cobalt can be a little bit stringy, so make sure you've mixed it up really quite well before you apply it to the paper. I'm using obviously a bigger brush. Let's start here and let it sort of merge with what we've already got on the paper around these light areas. Now if I put cobalt and light red together, I can get a warmish grey which will fit nicely underneath these light clouds. Then back to the light red and raw sienna to get a warm colour for the lower clouds. Don't feel that you've got to don't feel that you've got to cover all of the paper. In fact, a little bit of unpainted paper really lifts the sky. Then go back to the grey, and as you come down towards the horizon, of course, the clouds will get smaller. More cobalt and light red. I'll go over the chimney stacks. Let's have a little bit of a lighter blue here. It'll be lighter. Let's go around these chimney stacks. If you have some blue on one side, make sure you have some on the other side, so it looks as if the sky goes behind the chimneys rather than around them. Then rinse the brush, take some of the water off, and let's have a little bit more of the light red, raw sienna. Lots of water, just take some of the paint off, and these will be very small clouds way down near the horizon. take some of that drips up. I'll just take that drip up there before it starts to misbehave. Always concerned about very wet areas against moist areas. Then back to the, put a little bit more blue with the grey, just to indicate the smaller heavy trees here, so I can don't have to worry too much about that. Get a sense of distance by having the smaller clouds disappear into the horizon. Now when you get to this stage, try and, I'll just make one bold horizontal stroke across there. Resist the temptation to go back. If you go back, you'll go back with a dry brush or a wet brush or a tissue around your finger. If you watch it dry, then you'll end up with a cauliflower, or you're fiddling with it, and it will dry unevenly, simply because, let me just touch that bit there, simply because the moisture varies. There's some areas like this one over here that's quite wet, that's quite wet there. Other areas have probably already dried out, so they'll dry unevenly, but you won't help it. If you're tempted to get into mischief, then do what I do and go somewhere else. I'm just going to indicate the ploughed field. Let's put a bit of burnt sienna and a bit of cobalt just to cool it down. This ploughed field here. Big horizontal strokes, in contrast to the more rounded strokes of the sky. The land lays flat, and therefore it seems appropriate to paint it with the long horizontal strokes. And then while that's drying, we can just put in a light wash on the front of this building here. And a little bit of drawing with some thicker paint just while that's drying to get to the gutter line here and there. And then with a damp brush, let's just soften that bottom bit so it merges a little bit with the green. I've had to do that in a different way because the green had already dried out, but that doesn't matter. And while that's drying, a bit of Viridian and burnt sienna and a bit of raw sienna. Quite thick paint. There's a little bush here which we can indicate. If that paint's nice and wet, that'll merge, and we can get the little bush there and one here as well, and that will set up that light wall. And similarly here. And if it's soft in the sky, that doesn't matter if the sky hasn't quite dried out. And as ultramarine and light red will indicate the bluey grey distance. Which we can then merge into put a little bit of raw sienna with it, merge in with a distant, another Another little hedge here perhaps. To get a sense of distance, we can get the colours to merge with one another. Again, using the principle that if the paint consistency, the amount of paint with the amount of water is roughly the same, then you can still get distinct colour shapes, but also they've merged with a soft edge. Now we'll just let that dry out before we then tackle the foliage, the tree and these trees in the distance here. Now in the penultimate, fourth lesson, we'll start looking at the foliage and the trees. And here I want to show you how you can control the watercolour by paying attention to the paint consistency, as well as the getting a variety of brush strokes to convey the huge variety and untidiness of nature when it comes to organic material.